So what's different about today's talk is that we won't be taking your questions in between the talk. We let the speaker finish her topic and then all the questions will be picked up for the question answer round. You can type them in the group chat as and when something comes to you. Shreya, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. This is Shreya this side, and I'm going to talk today about Chidkuli Verb Inflection 101. So it's going to be a talk which is quite fundamental in nature, but it's going to talk about things that are pretty relevant, like agreement. Just a little about myself. So I'm doing my PhD in JNU, and I'm working on 4 languages. So these 4 languages are spoken in neighboring districts of Himachal Pradesh. They are neighboring languages. The first is Chidkuli, the one I'm presenting today. Officially, it's called Chidkuli Kinnauri, and it's spoken in Kinnaur. The other one that I'm working on is Spiti. It's spoken in Lahore and Spiti. Then I am working on Kului, which is the 3rd language. It's spoken in Kulu. And finally, I'm working on Gaddi, which is spoken primarily in Chamba. Particularly, it's originated from Bharmor. That's why it's also called Bharmori. So for my presentation today, I'm going to stick to data from Chidkuli Kinnauri, and I'm going to discuss it. And before I do that, I'm going to talk about some very basic terminology and build a little more on what my friends and colleagues have already done on agreement. Some basic terminology that will be helpful when I'm talking and you can understand me in those terms. Because one second, yeah. So because I'm going to focus on agreement, I'm going to look particularly on what is the Chidkuli agreement scenario. So we have both subject agreement with the verb and object agreement with the verb. The copular morphology is also very important when it comes to understanding the verb inflection system or agreement system. So I'm going to introduce that a little bit as well. And finally, we're going to look at the Chidkuli verb inflections, which is tense, aspect, mood, and agreement. So because I know that I have some friends here in the talk who are also from masters, so I'm also going to give a basic introduction to these as they come. So I think we can begin now. So it's always fun to start with questions, and inflection, we all know what it is. So it's a word formation process which helps to change the form of the lexeme in such a way that it can fit into a particular grammatical context. So essentially you're just changing the category or making some modifications, but not necessarily creating a new one. So those inflections or those affixes that help in the process are called verbal inflections if they are specifically related to the verb. So verb inflections in your own language, you can think of your own languages, and the affixes that you think are adding to the verb, you can think of what kind of information they're really giving you. So is it related to tense, aspect? Is it some kind of modal information, or is it some kind of agreement? So that is what we'll look at in today's talk as well. So let's start with the basic what is agreement. So if you look at the sentence, she sings in the college chorus. So here you have the now the pronoun, which is the subject. We see that the verb is sings. Now if I change the pronoun and make it they, what happens is we see a change on the verb. And as you can see, the one that is underlined is the one that which is the grammatical context remains the same. So what we realize here is that with the change in the pronoun, we see a change on the verb. So this covariance relationship, this correspondence that we see between the pronoun that which is the subject in this case and the verb, this is what is called agreement. Okay, I'll talk about why I've colored them green and brown. So we'll look at that. So just a basic definition of, if you ask me what agreement is. So Steele says that agreement commonly refers to a systematic covariance between a semantic formal property of one element and that of the other, just like what we discussed. So if we, this is the same sentence that we just discussed, just I'm introducing the features that are on the pronoun and that of the verb. So 3 or 4 terminologies that become crucial here are these. So the first thing that we spoke of was that with the change in the pronoun, we saw a change in the verb, right? So here we can say that the the first terminology here is that the pronoun is what is called the controller, that the element that determines agreement. So here the verb is called the target because it is the one that is changing, and in a way the controller is causing the target to change. Now the ones in blue are what we call agreement features. So the features in respect to which you say agreement is happening. So if you think of agreement, you can say that, or you can imagine it like this, that so you have a pronoun like she. So inherently she is a female, right? It is singular. So these features are inherent on the controller, on the pronoun. And because of agreement, what is happening is the features of the pronoun are sort of copied on the verb, or you can say the verb is cloned in such a way that there is a copying of these features of the controller onto the target. And that is why you say that there is a change in the verb. This is how we look at agreement systems. Now let's look at Hindi data. So some of my friend like Inakshi and I think Sakshi also introduced object agreement. So what is object agreement? What we saw right now in English is what is called subject verb agreement. There is also there are also languages that have object verb agreement like that in Hindi. So ladke ko nayi kameez mili. Here the controller is not the subject boy, but it is kameez. So kameez here is feminine singular, and you see the same on the target get. Now target, so there can be more than one targets. Like here new also takes the feature, and we see that it is nahi. Now if the object here was, for example, pajama, which is masculine singular, so you will see that the verb also takes masculine singular agreement, and here you see new also taking masculine singular. So this is just the basic terminology that we need to understand: controller, target, and agreement features. So when we talk about agreement features, it becomes crucial to understand the typology of the language, and that's why that is what has interested many morphologists in linguistics. And if you talk of agreement features, the first feature that comes into your mind is of course gender agreement, because in India we have a lot of languages that do. But if you look at various typological studies that have been carried out across the world, it's not necessary that any language should have, say, gender or person. It varies. So agreement is a very varied phenomena, but it's very vibrant and very complex at times also. So the if you talk of agreement, what kind of values do you think it takes? So if you think of your own languages, like in Hindi, I know I have masculine and feminine agreement, but what is interesting is that when you look at various typological work, morphologists who work on such languages, you'll see that it's not just these two. There can be many values for gender. There's masculine, there's feminine, there's some languages have what is called neuter gender. There are some languages that have four. We look at data from one which has masculine, feminine, neuter, and what is called vegetable. Then there are languages like I think it's called Fula. So it has around 20 gender values. So the more vibrant the language is, you sometimes end up seeing a very interesting lineup of gender agreement. So let's look at what happens to residue nouns. So what is residue nouns? If you look at the controller or the noun or a pronoun, whatever is really handling agreement, how do you see inherently these values? So for those nouns that have gender that is biologically determined, there is no issue. So for example, a man will always have masculine agreement and a lady will have feminine agreement. But what happens to those nouns, for example, something that is inanimate or that's non-living? So how is gender assigned to that? So that is what is called gender agreement, grammatical agreement on the noun. Otherwise it's called natural gender. This is called grammatical gender. So these nouns that inherently or biologically are not, it's very difficult to understand the gender agreement on those. So these are called residue nouns, and a lot of morphologists have, or typologists or people who are documenting languages, they try and understand what are the factors or components that are involved really in understanding gender. So either they find that there is some kind of semantic assignment, or maybe it's a form based system. So if you look at a language like Kannada, so they have three genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. So if it is something which is related to female humans, it's feminine. If it's related to masculine humans, it's masculine. There's no issue there. Then in the language, you have heavenly bodies and deities, and you have certain demons. So these are also assigned masculine or feminine. So there's masculine versions and feminine versions, so we have no problem there. And everything else is what you would call a residual noun, where you can't understand by simply looking at it as to what kind of a gender would it be assigned. So residue nouns in Kannada, it's super easy. All of them are put into neuter category. So a father, appa, will be masculine, amma will be feminine, but nai or dog or maybe an infant which is unborn will be neuter, because you don't know the gender yet. Okay, so there are some languages that have, as I said, form based systems. So it could be morphological form, or it could be phonetic form. So there are a lot of languages. There's one, I think I've mentioned Kafar. Yeah, so Kafar is a north eastern Ethiopian language, and what is very interesting is that so all those nouns that are biologically determined masculine, they have masculine feature in them, in the controller, and feminine have all the female ones have feminine. But for the residue nouns, how do they assign gender? So simply, if you look at the form of the noun within the citation form, with the citation form, if it ends in an accented vowel, then you have feminine agreement, else you have masculine. So in case of winter and taste, you see that a consonant and a vowel ending words, but still, because taste, for example, doesn't have an accented vowel, that is why it will still remain masculine, but autumn remains feminine because it has an accented vowel at the end. What is important to also remember is that always there are a few exceptions. So it's not a very fixed assignment per se, but this is the general pattern that is found across. If you look at another semantic assignment, basically, that is so this language is actually spoken in it's an Australian Aboriginal language, Bin Gung, I think, yeah, Gung Wok. Yeah, I remember that. So what happens in this language? This is a dialectical variety of the language, and you see that there are four kinds of gender categories here, or values for gender. But the system is quite interesting here, because let's just take one of these explanations. Let's look at animates. So here you will see in masculine you have all the default things are masculine, but there are some lower animates also that are masculine. Some higher animates are also masculine. Even within feminine, you see female higher animals. Some lower animals are here also. So uh, the more interesting and complex it is, the more difficult it becomes. But you don't have to essentially, that's not what we are aiming to do, that put them into watertight compartments. But this is just looking at typologically how they can be done. So generally this is the phenomena, and that's how you look at languages. Next is, so we've already spoken about gender. It can have values of masculine, feminine, and neuter. Then let's look at what is, I think, person. Yeah, so most languages have first person, second person, and third person agreement. Those languages that have person agreement, you see these three. Within first person, you can see, so if it includes or excludes the hearer, that difference is what is called inclusive and exclusive. So we, whether if you're talking to me, do you include me or not? Second person is quite fine, but in third person, you have the difference of what is obviate and proximate. So what happens is, if I'm talking about you and you are less central to this conversation, then I have an obviate feature that is, inherently on the noun, and when I'm reflecting it on the verb, we will see an inflection for that as well. And proximate means you are still quite central to the conversation. Then you have the feature number. So it can have many values. Most languages we heard singular and plural in conjugations when we learn foreign languages. As we will see in Chitkuli, it has dual as well. There are languages in trial. So dual means that two, when two items are uh, 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 two items are sort of spoken of, then you have a dual assignment. So when you have three, you have trial. And so POCL is like, so In some languages across the world, what you see is you have a small quantity of things, but you don't know exactly what the number is. So you use a focal value for number in that case. So these will be inherent on the noun, and they will be contextual because they are dictated by syntax and controlled by the controller. We see them on the verb, which is the target. Then so this was a study done by Baibi about so why the study is relevant is because she took languages from across the world, from different language families, so it's pretty relevant even today. And if you look at the general way in which you say that these features are found across languages, gender is the least, while person and number seem to be the most prominent features which we find in agreement systems. Another important feature that Kober talks about is that of honorificity agreement. So the way in which you're sort of addressing, or the respect in the way that that is conveyed, the respect that is conveyed in your attitude towards the person, that is what is called honorificity. So it can be either present or absent. We have very interesting and amazing features in a language, Maithili, which is spoken here in India also. So in Maithili, what is very interesting is that in second person, you have 3 grades of honorificity, which is either the person will have honorific, or there's a mid honorific, and there's a non-honorific agreement. And within the third person, you have honorific and non-honorific. So when you see the interplay of these, because it's a fusional language, and sometimes one single exponent can show both kinds, so it becomes very interesting to understand agreement systems in these languages. So for now, these were the general notions about agreement features and the general patterns we see. Throughout my dissertation, actually, I look at these as features and values. I use this terminology. You can read a lot about it from Aisha's grammatical categories lecture notes, which are available on ePathshala, which very well explains why this kind of an approach could actually. So this very notion of an exponent being uh, a, a representative of a bundle of feature values, really, when we're looking at agreement, and how features and values, this kind of an approach is a neutral approach. You can look at interdisciplinary studies and how these can this way of looking at agreement can make it can make life much more easier and less complicated. So you can go through that and read that as well. Now yeah, so now let's just come to the language, Chitkuli. So officially it's called Chitkuli Kinori on the Ethnologue website. And so according to the classification, they say it's Western Himalayan language, which is true. Now when I asked my speaker, I realized that Chitkuli Kinori, or Chitkuli as they like to call it, is not mutually intelligible with what is called the standard Kinori, which is spoken in central Kinnaur, and also the Kinnaur that's spoken in Kalpa. So I think it is definitely not, it's not that easy to just call it a dialect, but rather more study needs to be done on it. I'm looking at just verb morphology, and I can see how different it is. Sometimes the speaker couldn't understand completely what I was saying. Sometimes he could get some words, and then it was easy for him to understand. Now, if you look at the map, I hope you can see my pointer. So, so when I say standard Kinori, this is, yeah. So from here until Riba, yeah. So out here. So this is the area where Riba Khas, this is the area where you find standard Kinori spoken. Now, the Kinori that I'm working on is spoken out here, just in 2 villages, which is Chitkul and Rakcham. So Chitkul is actually the last village that we have towards the Indo-Tibet border. And so first of all, from the map itself, you can see that wherever we have water bodies, there we have settlements. So what we see out here is that wherever they find hospitable environment, they there are hamlets that are settled across these water bodies. And mostly they are sort of isolated from the rest of the world, But now with time, of course, with migrations, people have got to know each other, and now they understand the other person's varieties and languages as well. So yeah, so this is basically what is, so this map has been taken from the handbook of the census data. So it's, I thought it would be quite useful to look at it like this. Then yeah, so this is from the Ethnologue website, and they believe that it's an endangered language, very small population speaks it. And unfortunately, when I was doing fieldwork, I realized that most community members now they are knowingly making efforts. Like, for example, they try not to speak their language in front of their children because they want them to speak in English and Hindi. And even in primary schools, as we will see, they teach in standard Kinnauri or Hindi. Nowadays Hindi has become quite common, as he was telling me. Just a little information about my fieldwork. So for my MPhil, I worked on a questionnaire with my supervisor Aisha, and based on the DAL questionnaire, we developed one questionnaire which tries to collect different values for different verbal paradigms. And I started with Abhi's basic sentence list, and I built on that. I've also taken questions what came to me on the field on the spot, but generally I used these two. Now because I have a lot of sentences, and my attempt is to complete the entire paradigm once I figure out whatever the value is. So I try to stick to one particular speaker. So for my data today, I'm going to stick to one particular person. So he spent almost 16 years in Chitkul, and then he moved out for his job and education, but he keeps going back yearly, so he's trying to maintain contact. Now when I asked him if how does he write in his language, he told me he uses Devanagari, finds it easier. Primary education, as I already said, is given in Hindi and standard Kinnauri. Now, when I asked him, when I was doing his social linguistic profile, I realized that whenever he's communicating with his parents, whenever they have meetings where they discuss how to deal with ongoing festivals, arrangements. So, and if some kind of a calamity of something happens, how to deal with them. So there's meetings for that, and they sort of have songs for their rituals and festivals. So then they use Chitkuli. Otherwise they tend to normally stick to Hindi in their conversation also. Now for them, and I do realize that I said that they attempt not to try teach the language to the children, but when I was taking that details of the question, I realized that they do believe that knowing the language in some sense is helping them maintain their identity. Even them when they're outside, they are proud to call themselves Chitkuli. And one important festival which is primarily focused, or which is celebrated out here, is Fledge. So it's a flower festival where the village sends out people, mostly women, to go out and collect flowers and pray. And then their association with nature is quite strong, fairly religious people. So now let's look at Chitkuli agreement morphology. So Chitkuli is SO, we already said these things. And so the verb root is the base on which they build verb inflections. Now in terms of features, so we have tense, aspect, and mood. So you have you can look at it as past, present, and future, three-way distinction in tense. But there's no inherent or overt inflection for present, so it's absent. And you have exponents for future and past. Now if you look at aspect, you have 4 values, and mood, you have another 4 values. The last 2 of them, well, I'd like your suggestions on the same, but we'll see as they come. And in terms of agreement, so the language does not have gender agreement. It has person, number, and honorificity. As I already told you, there is dual feature which is prevalent in the language, along with singular and plural. In person, you have first, second, and third person. Now, I always find it useful to look at a template because I'm working on more than one language. It also, gives general insights about the language. So if you look at this, the first thing that you can see is object, which is object agreement. So whenever you have object agreement, that's the first thing that attaches to the verb root. And then you have whether tense or mood or agreement, it further attaches. Another interesting feature that you can see in the language is that wherever you see aspect adding, after that you see no further verb inflection added. And that is, I mean, it blocks literally any other inflection. And another interesting feature is the first one here. So here you can see you have object agreement. The second exponent will be tense.agr. That means along with having the value of tense, you also see the exponent as a representative of the agreement features, and not like the third one where you simply have it as a representative of agreement features. This is the construction of future tense. We will look at it. The language, as we already said, has I think I hope I said it, that copulars play a very important role in the language. They also take inflections. So for example, if you look at aspect, so if the verb root has taken an aspect, then as I said, no more inflections are added out here. So those inflections of tense and agreement will instead be added on the copula. So that's why copula also, you can say, it is playing quite an important role in the language. Yep. So let's just look at the three copulas. So the be verb has three forms. First one is to, second one is do, and third one is me. So if I'm talking about myself or somebody who is quite close to me, I'm familiar to, or in inanimates, if I'm talking about something that dearly belongs to me and is in physical proximity, I will use to. When I'm talking about some random tree on some random building or something like that, I will talk in terms of do. Some girl that I don't know who is probably dancing on the stage, so I'll use do there. And mostly whenever I have a low degree of confidence, I'm not sure, when I'm talking about future, I want to talk about, so I will use me in that construction. So just if you look at the data here, the first sentence is, what did your brother do here in DU? So here, because it's a brother and it's an important relation, so they use be here, the to form. Many years back, the water was very cold. So here, lis duge, again, they use the do form because they don't, the water body is not near them, and they're just talking about some random water body. The third one is, even though I'm talking about my future plans, I'm talking about having a very low degree of confidence about it. I'm talking about future. So I will use the ni copula here. I just wanted to explain the distribution out here. We'll look at how they have verb inflections when we move further. So yeah, so the system of agreement. Now you have two. One is
Shreddy, just
yeah.
one quick clarification.
Yeah.
In the data that you have specified till now, OBJ is object agreement and
Right.
AGR is subject agreement, right?
Right. Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, I should have just said that. Yeah.
No, it's cool. Carry on, please.
Okay, so we have two kinds of agreement. One is subject agreement, subject verb agreement, and object verb agreement. So when I have subject agreement, I want you to look at this table out here. So this is a representative of the exponents. So there are three features that come into play. Of course, you have number out here, singular, dual, and plural. You have honorificity also, and you have the person agreement here also. So if I take, for example, this ka, so this ka is a verb inflection that will be representative of the feature singular, feature value singular, also first person. And this ni, for example, will be second person, honorific, and singular. So basically, agreement is subject agreement. Exponent is the last one that attaches to the verb root. If you look here, ane chitti cheosh. So che is the verb root, o is the past inflection, and then you have one for agreement. Nasam share gitaks, again, ka here is representative of the first person, as in I will go. Then you have object agreement. So object agreement is again a very interesting feature in the language. Just like standard Kinori, you have object agreement for only first and second person, and it's the exponent that is reflected on the verb is cha. In standard Kinori, you find it on all verbs, and sometimes you also see a change in the verb stem if it's not necessary an inflection. But in Chitkuli, I found lesser number of verbs that take part in the conversation. And something like hit, bite, or do, they have a tendency to take the object agreement more. This is something I still have to look at. But across the language, I had around 50 verbs, and I checked for almost 20 of them if they took object agreement or not, and I had a good uh, number that did take it. So yeah, so now let's start with tense. So what is tense? When I'm talking about when an event happened, when the answer of when is given, it's basically locating an event on a time frame. I look at tense. So Reichenbach's theory is very useful. You can read a lot about it. It's quite helpful in understanding tense system. So he employs the use of 3 points. One is the event point, speech, and reference point. And when you're looking at, for example, the feature of perfect across languages, it's very useful to look in these terms. So let's look at the values that we have in tense. So the first thing is past tense. So if you have a copula, to a to copula, so you have k attaching to it. If you have a do copula, you have gay attaching to it. And if you have to, if it's a non-copular construction, you will simply see an o verb inflection on the verb root. Now, which is again a very interesting feature in the language, is if the event is a past tense which has happened just few hours back, and less than say 20 hours, not exactly yesterday kind of scenarios, you find gya. So I call it immediate past when I've sent my grammatical sketch as a chapter, but I think it's more appropriate to use this term out here. So what is mainly happening is it's more specifically just a few hours back. So I have gya that attaches to the verb root. After this, no agreement marker attaches. We'll look at the examples later, just as I complete future. So in future tense, you see that whenever the verb root or the base ends in ch or sh, you have o attaching. Otherwise, you have actually a table. And from this, based on this feature combination, once again of number, person, and honorificity, an exponent attaches. And after this, the exponent that is for subject agreement, that will attach. So let's look at some. I've just brought in the table for subject agreement here, so that it's easier for you to understand out here. So mother will make food, ama khao lantish. So T is here third person honorific future based on the table out here. And then you have sure, which is the subject agreement. So this is a future tense example. He wrote letters. You're talking about your big brother. So che osh, third person singular honorific here, and you have the past tense o here. Then he came. So he came, we're talking about an event that happened a few hours back. You're coming back from the event, you're telling your sister. So you will use banu gya out here, the exponent that we just spoke about. So in past tense, like in this sentence out here, we're talking about the king. He's quite respected. The person knows him very well. So he's using to construction copula here, and he uses k here. And then sure, because you're giving respect, third person singular honorific representation. The last one is of present case, where you see that there is null or no inflection attached. So this is pretty much what happens in tense. Now the next interesting thing is aspect. So aspect is quite important in the language. And what is exactly aspect? So when we're trying to understand, so tense was when it happened, but when we want to understand how it happened in that particular time frame, we look at aspect. So this discourse representation theory posits that there are two important components in understanding basically the aspect. So one is the situation type and one is viewpoint. So what is situation type? So what kind of a verb it is? It's a more abstract phenomena, unlike viewpoint, which is perfective, imperfective. You see it morphologically on the verb. But both of these together, it's sort of together giving us the aspectual meaning. So we saw, as I showed in the last few slides, that we have 4 values for aspect. There's perfective, imperfective, progressive, and habitual. And So let's look at perfective. So what happens in perfective? So you have focus on the entire event, right? You look at it as a whole, because it is sort of already completed. It includes both of initial and final points. So in the language, it is phonologically conditioned, the inflection on the verb. So based on the agreement from the controller, it happens on the target normally, but here we'll see that it's phonologically conditioned. So I mean, agreement, that is subject and object agreement, but here obviously it's phonologically conditioned, sorry. So if the verb root ends in ch and sh, you have is adding to the verb root. Otherwise, what happens is a reduplication of the final syllable. So here by is jog jog, but there is a verb porere. But chuk sha, because it ends in a sh, we have is attaching out here. So this is generally how perfective is reflected on the verb, and how it becomes an inflected verb. So the next one is imperfective. So the focus is on the part of a situation. So we're looking at it from the inside. It's an ongoing, for example, progressive scenario, or imperfective when it's it includes it's not a complete event really. So in this language, again, it's phonologically conditioned. So if the verb root ends in ch or sh, you have id. Otherwise you have ts added, like in the case of the b copula, ni. So you have ts. Otherwise you have hachid in happen. So that's and again, interesting phenomena. Then if you look at habitual, so what is habitual? Basically, when you have a characteristic which is extended over a period of time, it becomes a characteristic feature as a whole. So in the language, for example, if something is done repeatedly, like I wake up at 6 in the morning every day, something like that will have an inflection of if it ends in a vowel, and otherwise it's it if it ends in a consonant. Another yeah, so this is the data for the same. As you look out here, so this one ends in a consonant, so you have it. And here you have snake. Yeah, so I see snake daily, main saap ko dekhta hu, kind of construction. Here it ends in a vowel, so you have the. Another kind of interesting construction here is in the progressive. So progressive is an ongoing state of progress, and like it's happening. The verb root, if it ends in a consonant, it takes o. Otherwise, though is attached to the verb root. So if you look at the sentence out here, uh, play is yongcho. So cha, so it's the one with cha here. So you have o. But in sunche, the do is added here. So again, it's phonologically conditioned in the language. Next is mood. So basically, what is interesting in mood is, I mean, most languages, Western Himalayan languages, have a good and strong modal system to reflect moods. So whenever you're talking about the speaker's opinion or judgment regarding the event, which is basically what we call epistemic mood, we use mood. Sometimes when you're making a statement or passing a judgment about an event, the kind of evidence that you have, for example, did you see it, or did you hear about it, or did you touch, a tactile response, and is also reflected in the speech, then you have markers for these in the sentence as well. Sometimes these are called evidentials, the second kind. The third is like, so whenever you have what is called deontic, so whenever there is a need or requirement for an action to be taken based on the utterance that you make, that is what comes under the third category. So Chitkuli has imperative, epistemic, deontic, and ability. What I call deontic and ability is something that I'd like your response on as well. But first we'll talk about imperative and epistemic. So imperative is when you are signaling or giving direction, you're sort of giving commands, then you're using the imperatives. So I found imperatives obviously in the second person. So based on these feature, so Ra, you can say, is representative of a bundle of feature values of second person, singular, and imperative, and so are the others. Let's look at the sentence. By the time I return, you both finish writing this letter. So what is happening here is you have the nishke here, which represents you two, and you have a sort of agreement based on that out here, tum dono. Then let's look at the epistemic. So we've already discussed what it is. So Chitkuli normally uses, so we saw we had three forms in the copula, right? So there was to, do, and ni. So to and do are mostly used in past and present scenarios, and ni is used in future more often. So when you're not sure, he would be writing a letter. If I ask this question, what would he be doing by now? So, or at this point, you can answer with ni here, meaning that it is also reflecting in some ways that you are not exactly sure, but you're almost sure about this fact. So you have the use of the ni copula here to have some epistemic significance. Now, across many verbs in the language, whenever I was asking sentences where I was sort of asking them that I had actually, these were sentences like you should do this or you should do that, or I have to do this. So when there was a sense of compulsion to the sentence, the and the commitment was quite, I mean, it would take him to do a certain task more forcibly, then they use seya. So here you see bimuseya. So they also use sa here or say. I think this is a variation, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, because maybe it could just be my mistake in hearing it. So they use say out here, and then you have no agreement following. Then you have ability. So when you say I can do something, so I was actually looking for a terminology that I can use for it, and I found that some languages do have what they call a marker for ability, where they can inflect an exponent for the same. So whenever I say I can write, or I will not be able to write, or I cannot write it, I can dance, I will use Hans here to basically talk about it. And yeah, so that is pretty much about tense, aspect, mood, and agreement. Now, some other inflections that are found are also causative, and negation also is quite an important feature in the language. So what is a causative construction? So whenever it's a valency increasing operation, whenever you're trying to indicate that the subject wants someone to do something, or kisi se kaam karwaya, make some third person to do something. So here you have an the mother made the it's actually maa ne bacche ko doodh pilwaya, sorry, yeah, out here. And in terms of negation, so you have both prohibitive and negating. So whenever you have a prohibitive sort of construction, you see tha, and whenever you're just negating a sentence, you simply use ma out here, or ma. Both of these are used, and the lexical way to represent negation is by using mani. So I am sorry if I was a little fast, but I wanted to finish in time. So these are my references. Thank you so much, and I hope I can. I hope to answer your questions more effectively. Or just be over to you.
This was a great talk, Shreyadi.
I hope it was
Lots to
too
think
fast.
about.
Okay.
So we'll take questions now. First question came from Sakshi Bhatia. When you were talking about gender agreement, you mentioned lower animate and higher animate.
Right.
So she wants to know, what is a lower animate or higher animate?
Okay, so this is in terms of, for example, if you look at an animal, lower and a higher animate will be that difference, like if it's a small object or it's big, based on the size.
Okay.
Then
next one was from Yangchen. When you were giving us background on Chitkuli, you mentioned that they use Devanagari script.
Yeah.
So Yangchen wants to know, was there any other script used before that?
Yeah, so this is a very so I have tried a lot to understand what is the scene like in the language and how do they represent it. So what I was told, that there is a fort in Kamru that actually has a very they have a lot of inscriptions out there, and so a lot of archaeological study has been done to try and understand what kind of script that is. But they don't have clear insights yet. My speaker did tell me that he faintly remembers his grandfather using Tankari, but he's not sure. I know what they use now, but I don't think I'm sure about what they used to use before.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So Hima's question and Samapriya's question overlaps. They want to know about evidentiality and pronominalization in Chitkuli.
So I didn't find any evidential markers in the language as of yet. So because I'm working on 4, I'm not sure if I am honestly giving as much time to each language. But as of yet, I haven't found any markers specifically like in Spiti, for example. I have found markers. For example, just to give an example, whenever the speaker is uttering a sentence that he's giving that judgment based on what he saw, so he tends to use a marker out there. Whenever he has heard something and he's telling me the same information, so he will put that particular marker at the end of the sentence to signify what kind of evidence he has for that information. There's also one for tactile evidence. So for example, if you touched water and you know it's hot and you're telling me that the water is hot, you will put, for example, thak at the end or sak at the end to signify that what kind of evidence you have for the particular utterance that you're making. So that's a very interesting feature in the language out there. I didn't find any as of yet in the language in Chitkuli.
To this, Aisha says that if there was evidential marking, you would have found it by now.
Yeah, because I have a very so the DAL questionnaire, when I was working in MPhil, I remember having this discussion with Aisha where she said that it's a very, very useful questionnaire. For those of you who are aiming at working on verb morphology, you should definitely look at that questionnaire. It's quite it helps you complete and cover a lot of topics, and then you can just do another questionnaire to complete the paradigm of whatever features you find in that language.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
Next up is Vyom's question, who wants to know about copula markers in present.
Yeah, so let me just come to the slide. For example, if I'm saying if I'm talking about Vyom, so Vyom is my friend and I'm talking about him, and if he's close to me, which he is, so I will use to marker out there. Okay. But if I'm talking about a Vyom that I don't know and I'm making a statement in the present, it's just some boy about whom I read something in the newspaper and his name is Vyom, then I will use do there. So I can use both of them in present, but in future I will only use ni. And to and do don't occur in future constructions. This is also common in standard Kinnori. These 3 copulas of B. This is a common feature in all the languages across in Kinnor.
Nice. Next up is a comment by Aisha. When you were mentioning the template for verb morphology, she says there is a complete and utter violation of the mirror principle on inflectional affix attachment there.
Okay, I'm going to have to.
Can you just go back? Can you just go back? Can you go to your template?
Yeah, 1 second, Aisha. Can you see the screen at this point?
No.
Okay.
You stopped sharing.
And you're looking cool.
Oh, thank you. This is from fieldwork in Gaddi. 1 second, please.
Yes, we
yes, can you see it now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Aisha.
So you have, there is an object marker. So when you have you don't have a tense, and maybe it's not as uttered as I thought. So if object is a kind of agreement, so this is looking more like Bantu than it is looking like agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So in Bantu template, so it's not utter violation, so I was too strong in that. That when you have an object marker, it doesn't actually behave like agreement.
Yeah, it's just, true.
And which is related to, so I was just simply wrong. It is not an utter violation. Because so the mirror principle says that you will attach affixes will attach mirroring the syntactic relations that hold this. So the first relation will be with the object, then with tense, and then with agreement, right? And so do you have templates which will give you simultaneously aspect and object agreement without an object rather, without any agreement? I mean, does that happen?
No. So you have to have either tense, mood, or aspect after object.
So it's quite low. Okay. But yeah, so the place why I said was it was utter violation was the object and aspect. I thought that aspect should be lower. But if it is not an agreement marker of the kind, and I think Srikar's point then comes in here. Srikar could come to the example number.
Before Shrikar, Hima wanted to add something on the same point.
Yeah, hi Shreya.
Hi.
Yeah, so that's why I was asking if this object is object marker or object agreement. What exactly is that? Because
It's an object marker. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have clarified it. Yeah.
so because in some of the Tibeto-Burman languages I'm working on, there is something called pronominalization or argument indexing, which is
Oh, okay.
yeah. So they can be either prefixed or they can come before the tense aspect morphology, etc. I mean, they have different slots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this
that-
one, so Himachi, what happens here is there's only one slot, and if there has to be a reflection of object agreement, it has to be after the verb root. So that's a feature in the language.
Similar question is what Sakshi wants to ask at this point. What contexts allow this object marker? Could this be a transitivity marker?
So I've been working on this, and I'll be honest, I'm still because it's a little different from what I see in the other varieties of Kinori, that is spoken in different regions. So I'm still working on it now. As far as the data that I have so far, I have verbs like hit, do, and bite, and stuff, ones like these. I didn't find anything related to transitivity per se, but I think it may have something to do with the kind of verb that is. But I definitely have to work further on this, so I'll probably get back to you, Sakshi, when I have some more information on it.
So if you remember the talk that was on Haryanvi, Sakshi
Right.
Singh's talk. So there was a class of verbs that with patient verbs, hit or contact, any kind of contact, attachment, or rather just contact, I don't know, but yeah, it was also attachment. Sakshi can come in. But they took a special kind of, they took the special case marker, right? So there was lexically restricted. So it's possible that maybe this is a theta role marking.
Yeah, it could. I definitely have to do a little more digging on this.
But do is surprising then. I don't know what do is doing.
Yeah, it does happen.
Shrika, you can come in now. Sorry, I had to interrupt you before.
No, that's all right. I think everyone covered whatever.
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on from object marking. Sakshi Bhatia's another question is that she wants to know whether there is no honorificity contrast for second person in the future, but the contrast is present in other tenses. And if this is true, then any thoughts on why that should be the case? Should I repeat?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is there no honorificity contrast for second person in the future, but contrast is present in other tenses?
I'm not sure why it's happening, but definitely we can see it happening out here.
Okay. Sakshi, I hope you are okay with that. Next question coming up is from Samapriya.
Hmm.
It's a comment actually. He finds it interesting that both for future and the aspectual markers, final ch and sh behave differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comment.
Okay.
Next is a question from Vyom who wants to know, is it possible, given that many verb roots in the example end in ch or sh, this could be some morpheme?
Yeah, so I remember having this discussion with Aisha also when I took up data. I have actually, fortunately, I've had some data from Standard Kinori also. I've been looking at data and I've been trying to understand if there is something that I'm missing out here. But I don't, as of yet, I don't. So this is work in progress. So if something comes up, I'll let you know, Vyom, but I don't think it is. So the infinitival form is me or ma, na. It can be me or mu or nu. For example, if something ends in cha, you will have a e after it. So hunchi ming or something like that will be its infinitival form. And so I don't know why it's happening, but it does seem like cha is something. I will definitely get back to you when if I find something.
So Vyom will also join our category where we are all waiting for your PhD thesis now.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it myself. Yeah.
Next question, Madhu has a data question.
Yeah.
Example 16 and 17.
1 second.
Point.
Huh? Yeah.
So in 16, it's ending with it and 17 is ending with the. The habitual marker depends on vowel ending of the root verb. Is this a phonological change?
Yeah, so it's phonologically conditioned. If it's ending in ch, then it takes it, and if it ends, basically any consonant, it ends in it, and if it ends in a vowel, it takes the. So it's phonologically conditioned on the verb root.
Okay. Okay. Kinjal wants to have a clarification in example 17. So there, do we get accusative dative on the subject in a scenario where we otherwise expected nominative?
Okay, I don't think I got the question. Yeah, can you say that
In
again?
17, you have marked it accusative dative.
Right.
The anu.
Right.
So is this a case where we were expecting nominative, but we actually got accusative dative?
I don't think so. I will look at more data and I will get back to you on this, but I don't think so. No.
Okay. Next up is Madhu's question, where she wants to know, could you explain how the agreement exponent works in tense before agreement morpheme comes in?
Okay, yeah. So I think it will be helpful if I look at future only. 1 second. Huh?
Take your time.
Yeah, so if you looked at future, what I was saying is basically there are two slots after the verb root. If the first one is representative of future plus the agreement features based on this table out here, and after this you have another agreement, a subject agreement morpheme that is attaching out here. So if you looked at the sentence number 7, so the verb after the verb do, which is lan, you have t, which is third person singular honorific out here, and then you have another exponent which is representative of the subject agreement, which is third person honorific, which is sure, which is the one out here. Yeah, singular. So this is the one that's attaching. So this is how future tense is formed in the language.
Oh yeah, can I come in?
Hi,
Sure,
Madhu.
Madhu.
Yes.
Yeah, hi Shreya. So is it kind of doubling like we see in Methylone, the feature, because the feature represents the same, right? Like
Yeah,
third
it's
person
quite
singular
interesting. So
honorific. Yeah.
agreement is yeah, it I don't know what happens in Meitei, but definitely agreement is coming in twice. Once it is bundled with future, and then it's coming again as a separate marker of subject.
Yeah, or
Agreement.
maybe like object marker, it can be a subject marker too, right?
I didn't get that last part.
I mean, maybe it can be also like object marker. This can also be like a subject marker rather
Uh,
than saying agreement.
no, so
Another
Yeah,
Yeah,
Odysseus.
sorry to interrupt. Shrikar had made a point which is relevant here.
Yeah.
So there, if the variation is thinking along the lines that maybe the variation with future tense is phonological because there's significant overlap between the future tense paradigm and the agreement node paradigm.
Oh, okay.
Okay, maybe I will check that out. Maybe that's the case.
But I think this is also seen in other tenses, not just future, isn't it?
No, so only in future tense that you have, say, the second exponent representative of both agreement and tense, and then agreement.
Oh, okay,
So
fine.
it's only
Yeah.
in future. So I
Okay.
definitely thank you for letting me.
Yeah, then Shrikar's point makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Thank
what
you.
I have a question.
Yes, Aisha.
Why it is Srika, could you just explain what would be the phonological conditioning environment? Why would you're saying that Lanti is the form then, or what? I didn't understand what your point was.
Yeah, so I was just
Sure.
comparing these two paradigms, and it seemed like whenever you have a ch as a agreement marker, you get t as the future tense, except in the top right, the first
There's
person
an
plural.
exception.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Yeah, that's why I
Yeah,
didn't
okay.
say it's phonologically conditioned, but I mean, I will check it out.
No,
Maybe
so
there's.
Yeah, that's all.
No, so generally, so if you look at double marking, we see double marking in the area of aspectual morphology. So if you look at the allomorphy of the stem, so in English past you see that double marking of, so in keep the stem, that you get a stem mutation which gives you kep,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And then you have the regular plural. So essentially kept becomes doubly marked, right? Go and went. So even suppletion, you have the regular past morphology, but you have also a stem mutation. So I think generally from Srikar's point, if we see this as really a double marking scenario, but I don't know about languages. I don't know. I've never seen this kind of data there from on agreement, but it's there in aspectual and maybe also tense morphology. So there would be a point, but you would have the problem with first person in this case.
While we are on this slide, there's one clarification on the tables.
Okay.
So first person plural in both tables, is that for exclusive or inclusive?
First person, एक second, huh? Yeah, so so this is an interesting actually what happens in standard Kinori is there is a differentiation of or there's a first person plural inclusive exclusive difference, but I don't find it in the language here. I mean, this feature isn't there in Chipkuli.
In agreement, right?
Yeah, in agreement, right?
Okay. And while we were on the point of phonological conditioning, Miraba also had a comment to make. He had observed another pair where you might have a case of phonological conditioning, where you had the to ke and do ge combination happening.
Yeah. Yeah, though, yeah, with you have right.
So it's just a comment that
Right.
that seems an environment for phonological conditioning too.
Yes, that's right. True. Yeah.
Okay. One more question from Samapriya. He says that even though you mentioned that Chitkali isn't mutually intelligible with Kinori, do the morphemes you note here have obvious cognates in Kinori with at least some partial semantic agreement?
Yeah, that's true. So they are comparably similar, but so when you look at the data in general, the difference is in it's mostly hugely lexical. So I think that is one of the major reasons why it happens. Then there are some features that are different as well. So for example, if you look at the agreement system, the system is the same. For example, even in future tense, what we were seeing out here, the double agreement. in one single exponent and then agreement happening again. This is also a feature that is common in standard Kinori. Yeah, if you look at just the verb morphology, definitely if you know the verb morphology of Chitkuli, you will be able to figure out standard Kinori. But the variation in lexemes is completely, it's polar opposites, and there's no way you would figure out what the word means until somebody tells you what it is. So that is one of the major reasons why I think they say that they don't understand that particular language. Now, because for example, in trade or people are coming in contact with each other, the basic words like do and go, they seem to figure out. So that's still understandable for them.
Interesting. One more point from him. It's just a comparative observation he's making. He has seen that in a language called, spelling is difficult. He has Gulami from
Okay.
Tajikistan. The object marker "s" that attaches in the present only, but not in the past. That is not the case that's in Chitkuli, right? Is it
Can you
the
repeat? Yeah,
so?
sorry, my network went really weird.
No
Can you
issues.
repeat the question again?
So in Chitkuli, the object marker that you have observed,
Right.
does it attach in the present and not in the past? What's the
No,
scenario?
so it can attach in any tense. There's no conditioning per se for a particular tense or aspect.
So Samapriya's supposition is on the mark here. We have two comments, one from Yangchen and one from Madhu, who have seen a similar phenomena happening in Gaddi and Tinkerlo too. Madhu has a
What
comment
in
that
Gaddi?
Gaddi,
No,
Yangchen,
I meant that Tankri is used in Gaddi
Okay.
when
okay.
you mentioned
Okay,
that. Yeah,
okay,
it's
script.
not to do
Okay,
with
lovely.
this discussion.
Yeah, true. Yeah, they did use Tankari before, true.
Okay, and Madhu just had an observation that infinitive verbs take a particular form too. Okay.
This was follow-up of Vyom's comment. The ch marker, yeah.
Thanks, Madhu.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
Okay,
you.
thank
Yeah.
you.
It's interesting to work on such languages and then come up with similar phenomena later on. One more question, and you have a compliment already. Samapriya says your talk's excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Aisha wants to know, do object markers show up in causatives?
No, I actually I had just 10 causative constructions, so I don't think I should. I mean, I in those 10 I did not find them.
Okay. Sakshi had the same question, but you already answered it. So this is the final call for questions. Any more question, comment, observation? Shrikar has something. What are your thoughts on what's happening with copulas here?
So I mean, in what exactly do you? I mean, if you have a specific question, then I'd like to.
Shrikar, in what sense do you want to know?
Yeah. So I was just wondering, because the things that seem to affect how the copula is realized, they're all like tens and mood and stuff, right? So they're sort of high in your tree, like. So I was just wondering what you think is going on, like that.
I haven't
Syntactically.
thought. No, I haven't. I didn't. Well, because in my dissertation, what I'm looking is a typology of features. I'm trying to build a feature geometry, so it's more of typo than I haven't thought of it yet in terms of syntax. So, sorry, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
That's completely possible with the amount of data you are handling at one time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Miraba wanted to get the data for K-gay phenomena from you because he's looking at consonant harmony example in Indian languages.
Cool. Yeah. So I've Miraba, you know my email ID. I will send you some data if you want. You can just, if you have a specific question, you can send that to me as well. I will get
He
back to you.
says thanks for that. And that's a common point here. If anybody has any other follow-up question or observation, they can always write to our speaker for the day. Shraddhi, if you could just move to your first slide, people can note your email address.
Yeah, 1 second now.
So I think that's a wrap up for today. We have exhausted all the questions. This
Thank you
was
so much, Ojasvi, and everybody else. It was fun. I hope I wasn't too fast. I enjoyed it as much as I hope you did too.
we learned, we revised our concepts, and we got clarified. And you gave us a visual tour of Kinnaur too.
Yeah, this picture is from Rakcham. Those of you who wish to visit can definitely
Once
travel out here.
our achhe din come. Once.
Yes, definitely. Once the lockdown is over, definitely.
Yes. Compliments are pouring in for you in the group chat. You can enjoy them there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ojasvi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for today's wonderful morphosyntactic talk. And thank you to all the participants for connecting with us today. The talk, which was supposed to happen tomorrow, has been unfortunately cancelled because of some technical issues that are not in our control. So after today, we'll directly meet on May 10th, that's Sunday. On May 10th, we have Reena Ashram talking to us on morphosyntactic influence on morphophonological well-formedness, a view through Methalon at 2 p.m. So from this morphosyntactic area, we'll again jump into the world of phonology. Hoping to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Stay safe.